Hmm. Hello, everyone. I was just playing St. Patrick's prayer it's called the Deer's Cry, as it's St. Patrick's Day and welcoming in that Celtic energy. Um, there's a really interesting story behind apparently a huge, long prayer that's been turned into a song by this composer called Sean Davey. I'll post it in the tribe because I actually listen to this almost every day. I like start the day because it's a prayer of protection. And he was in Ireland and he was being hunted down by the King of Tara, apparently. And so he came up with this prayer, and the soldiers saw him and his men going through the forest as deer. And so they were safe. And it's always sort of one of the crazy stories because it's like such a pagan shamanic story for St. Patrick. And I've also been to a place in Lancashire in Britain where St. Patrick was washed ashore from a shipwreck. So he survived quite a lot of different things. There's so many like interesting stories about who this person was. And it seemed quite a nice introduction as well to Jupiter today. I've never actually gone in depth into Jupiter, but I was really inspired earlier in the year in one of our cleanse sessions talking about the Yin Wood and the connection with Jupiter. And so I thought, I'm going to see what Jupiter is doing this year. And it is actually really interesting. Um, so, so what I'm going to do, I've a bit of a shorter session today because I've got this Holy Grail class I'm doing later. Well, it's not a class as such, but it's a mythology thing. So today we'll just do the presentation. There be a little time for other people to contribute. But hopefully this is going to set a nice backdrop to the year and things we might focus on in order to draw on the Jupiter energies that are available to us at the moment. That's what I love about being an astrologer. It's like we can actually learn to, um, you know, we can learn to ride these cosmic waves. So I'm trying to come out now of this and go into Canva. There we go. I can do that. Okay, so Jupiter presentation. Here we come. And then go back one. Okay, so Jupiter, this is all about Jupiter in 2025. So Jupiter has an 11-year orbit. So, one way you can think about how Jupiter might affect you in your chart, it is very powerful, Jupiter. It's all about your ability to expand, really, and grow and seek the higher vision. Um, and so when you were 11, 22, 33, 44, etc., you can look at really significant things that happened to you at those ages. And interestingly, I had a kind of huge fracture with my family when I was 11. And so this this has been really healing for me to look at personally because I can see how this year what Jupiter's doing is going to be really good for me, but for potentially everyone as I've called it strengthening our roots because some people may say like, oh, can't stand my family. And, I've spent many years like not having anything to do with my family in my, say, like my 30s and stuff. But more and more, the more I get into the gene keys, actually, the more I've seen, yeah, I do need to do this healing work for myself. Um, and then I get into this whole other thing where you feel, as you heal your ancestral roots, you feel the gifts coming through and the support of your ancestors. So it's almost like in order to access that wonderful treasure chest, you have to kind of look at the shadow material and what you've inherited, really, both in terms of negative patterns and positive patterns from your ancestors, and what might prevent you expanding, flourishing, bearing fruit, all these kind of terms that we might think of with Jupiter. Okay, so this is the quote that really got me going, my fascination, my curiosity, which Tara read out in during the winter cleanse. So the astrologer who wrote this is called Peter Raven. He's really interesting because he does quite a lot of Chinese stuff, not to do with the gene keys, which is based on the I Ching, but he gives a really good kind of flavor of a kind of Chinese medicine interpretation. So I'm just going to read parts of this. In the heavenly stem cycle, Yi is the second year of the 10-year cycle and signifies Yin Wood. So this year we are in uh, Wood Year, and it's a Yin Wood Year. It represents the early growth of the seedling. Having broken through the soil, it is small, tender, and vulnerable. However, as opposed to its yang counterpart, this form of wood is flexible. It is the blade of grass whose strength comes from what keeps it in the soil, its roots. It draws strength from what cannot be seen, hidden below the soil's surface. We may look at a blade of grass as soft and weak because all we see is something small continually bending to the wind and being stomped on by feet and hooves. But it remains because its outward yielding nature is firmly rooted in its internal nature. I think that sentence is really what calls me and I feel is really important. You know, it remains because its outwardly yielding nature is firmly rooted in its internal nature. So I'm keeping that as like, yeah, everything we do should be creating this rootedness so that we stand in our strength. The wood phase in the heavenly stems represents the planet Jupiter. So Jupiter's movements in the sky are particularly important during the two wood years. And the thing about any wood year is to pay attention to what Jupiter is doing, especially against the backdrop of your own chart. So you might not get into be able to do that if you're not a sort of astrologer, um, but you can at least know what Jupiter's doing and just kind of feel into that. You can probably figure out on Taraka, actually, or any astrology program, you can see where Jupiter is in your chart. And in Taraka, you can find out what gene keys are activated by your Jupiter. And in the activation sequence, no, not the activation sequence actually, but the both the core wound, the vocation and the culture sphere in the Pearl sequence, and the core is in the Venus sequence. These are actually blueprinted by Jupiter in our chart. Okay, so I'm beginning today. Jupiter is currently in Gene Key 35, leading from hunger to adventure to boundlessness. So, what's interesting about this is we're actually in the last week of our 9-month Venus star point, where she was imprinted with the Gene Key 35. And now, next Sunday, the 23rd of March, Venus takes 9 months to turn around. So she's imprinted by the sun. She takes 9 months to turn around, and then she gives that imprint to the Earth. And so we have this kind of really strong field of the 35th gene key at the moment. And it's also called, it's very special in our DNA. It's called miracles and wormholes because we have this ability in our DNA through the 35, it's really unique to find shortcuts to evolutionary leaps, basically. So this is like the this is the gene key of quantum leaping. So it's very exciting that this is where Jupiter begins. I also just wanted to point out we've got this huge activity going on in Pisces at the moment and Aries. And we have this really unusual thing where Venus and Mercury are traveling retrograde together in Aries. So a lot is probably going to come up around communication, especially with partners because of Venus or close relationships. So just be really mindful of what emerges and how your own way of communicating might actually lead people to react in certain ways towards you. It's kind of like an opportunity to really own what we're putting out there and what we're receiving back. And that could be positive or negative things, to be honest. Um, okay, so oh, well, back. Okay, so at the moment, Jupiter's in Gemini, and according to that astrologer Peter Raven, and I definitely have a lot of AI into really interesting things going on in my life at the moment. The Jupiter is activating, almost like bringing to life AI in a totally new way. So that can bring up the positive sides of AI, but also the negative sides too. And really, it feels like as the humans who created AI, we have a great influence on it. You know, we can give it positive stuff or we can give it negative stuff. So it's almost like our child that we need to now feed positive stuff to. And and then on the 10th of June, Jupiter moves into Cancer. So this Cancer is the sign of family, friendship, and the deepening of roots. And we're going to be looking at the moon very deeply this year as well. So the moon is the ruler of Cancer. So this is going to enhance our connectedness to the rhythms of the moon, these deep bonds of family, which, whether we like our family or not, they're really important, these bonds, and to come to understand them in a new way is, I think, the opportunity this year. And it's interesting that as Jupiter enters Cancer, Mercury's right there. So again, it feels like communication within the family. You know, how do we communicate with our family? I know I can be actually quite contrary with my mom when I'm not normally like that. So we might actually give our parents, our siblings, all kinds of sides to ourselves that we don't give to anyone else. And so, well, not to judge that, but just to like notice it. So, in as Jupiter enters Cancer, we have the first gene key in Cancer is one of my favorites. It's gene key 15, and it leads from dullness to magnetism to fluorescence. And this is an amazing gene key. It works with gene key 8, and the shadows are mediocrity and dullness. It's just like, the need to kind of grow our gift, shine in the world. And when we do shine in the world, this is what gives us our magnetism. And at the Siddhic level, we become an eternally flowering spring and we start to actually activate other people into flowering as well around us. I mean, what's not to like with Gene Key 15? So then we also have a Venus-Jupiter conjunction later in the year. So you can see here in the chart, Venus and Jupiter are at 14 degrees Cancer, and this is aligned to the star Sirius, very connected with the Egyptians, with the Dogon people. There's three elements of three stars of Sirius. One is called an etheric star. It's called the Star of the Woman, and it's not one we can see, but the Dogon people talk about it, and they knew about Sirius B before the astronomers on Earth knew about it. So Sirius B is an incredibly dense star, and the Dogon people of Africa, this is, they call it a seed star. And then we have Sirius A, which is a very bright star in the heavens, connected with like Isis and Osiris, um, the rising of Sirius. Coincides with the flooding of the Nile. Well, it used to before they dammed it up. But so the rising of Sirius in many ancient civilizations was considered like the beginning of fertility. So this is very positive. And this takes place in gene key 52. In the I Ching hexagrams, it's mountain over mountain, and it's leading from stress to restraint to stillness, like the huge stillness of the mountains. I love that energy actually. So yeah, that's going to be really powerful. Okay, so remember Sirius because Jupiter's coming back there, and I'll show you how in a minute. Um, okay, so this is jumping forward to next year's time in March 2026, when Jupiter goes on a retrograde and comes back and actually stations on Sirius again. So that's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So here you can see Jupiter at 15 degrees Cancer, and this S means it's stationary just before it goes direct. So the key dates for Jupiter, you're welcome to screenshot this if you want to. 10th of June, Jupiter enters Cancer, gene key 15, an eternally flowering spring. Jupiter enters gene key 52, the stillness of mountains on the 22nd of July. It enters gene key 39, the tension of transcendence on the 17th of August. That could be an interesting time in America because gene key 39 is like the life work of America. So that will, you know, be interesting to see what happens really as Jupiter hits the 39, how that expansion might work out. Potentially a very positive time, a turning point. And on the 18th September, Jupiter enters Gene Key 62, which is called the language of light. So this is really plugging into like the language of the universe and how we might rescript that. Okay, so that is my little contribution. Um, I'm just reading it in the chat. That's wonderful. Yeah, so we have actually got about 15 minutes, which is good. Um, if anyone would like to comment on anything I've said, yeah, anything about that wood energy as well. It's just totally caught my fascination this year. And yeah, just anything really that strikes you in that. And if you know where your Jupiter is, you could let us know in the chat or say something about that. I'm going to stop the recording actually, so give me a moment to do that.